come on, grab a seat. And we have Christopher Ehrlich. We have Mr. TRPC. We've got Kent Dodds and Cody. Can't forget Cody Koala. And of course we have Sara. Please come join us. I'm.
Stay in the middle. You stay in the middle.
Okay, I really could not care less. Can you tell? Well, hey, thanks for joining us. This is really exciting. We're going to spend the next 25, 20, 30, 45, 60 minutes talking about...
Oh, we live here now.
Yeah, we just live here now.
Okay, that's cool.
Talking about JavaScript, TypeScript in the future. It's just a casual chit-chat, so nothing too serious as things are. And I want to kick us off with one topic that I think is really interesting, which is Kent.
In general,
It is actually true.
Tell us about yourself. Wait, I don't have a mic.
We're passing them around.
Pass it around.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we're playing football. Kent, I follow Kent on Twitter. I think all of you should, and I don't just mean like follow, but like turn on notifications for every new tweet because it's.
You really?
Yeah, why not? No, I recommend that to everybody.
I'm so sorry.
It's mostly like thank you. He's a very grateful person. Anyway.
Very nice.
Kent said on Twitter that going forward, he will prioritize more education with TypeScript first code snippets instead of JavaScript first. And I feel like this is interesting because that is a clear statement about the dominance of TypeScript, but also talks about kinda in a small way, JavaScript isn't as popular anymore, maybe. So Kent, I'm curious your motivation behind that and kind of how you've seen the response to it.
Yeah, sure. So I have been doing type JavaScript for years. I started with Flow. Yeah, may it rest in peace. No, just kidding. Flow is still cool. I love TypeScript though. And yeah, so I always taught JavaScript first because it was the least common denominator, made most sense. But recently I've seen in my workshop yesterday, I said, how many of you are using TypeScript at work? And 100% were using TypeScript at work. And so, yeah, what my tweet said was basically, unless I'm teaching you TypeScript or teaching you the fundamentals of JavaScript, I'm going to just be using TypeScript. So I'm still definitely going to teach JavaScript, but only when I'm teaching JavaScript. If I'm teaching anything else, like teaching you React or teaching you the web primitives or whatever, yeah, it's all just going to be TypeScript.
Interesting. And what has been the response to that? Like, have you got people saying...
Twitter is funny. Like, there are plenty of people... really quick, how many of you here are using TypeScript at work? Yeah. Like, there are people not raising your hands, and I don't want you to feel ashamed or anything. I know that you're envious of the rest of us, and that's fine. But, like, for real, though, like, it has won. It really has. And if you aren't using it now, you will eventually, very likely in the future. So it's phenomenal. And so I just fully expect to use it going forward.
Okay, TypeScript has won.
Yeah. Well, and actually,
who is that? Is that Orta? Is that someone from the TypeScript team?
It's even it's coming into JavaScript. There's a proposal for typed JavaScript right now on the TC39 at stage 1 that I was just looking at it, and it is basically almost all of syntax of TypeScript added to JavaScript. So it started out as just like code comments and stuff, but no, it's all just the regular syntax.
I want to circle back to that, but I want to get your thoughts on this statement TypeScript has won and how that affects the industry, how that affects you, and how, I mean, you use TypeScript daily.
I don't use it at work.
Whoa, she doesn't use TypeScript at work. Okay.
I didn't raise my hand. You just don't care. So I do think TypeScript has won. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But it has won, and that's fair. And I do think that, so my thoughts on it is that I don't think I'm sorry, Kent, but I don't think a lot of teaching materials should be done in TypeScript. I don't think the remix doc should be TypeScript. I don't think most docs should be TypeScript, unless it's like DRPC makes sense because it's fully written in TypeScript. But my thing is, if you know TypeScript, then you know JavaScript, but the other way around may not be true. It's like, it's like if you speak German, you understand German, but you may not understand Austrian. So it's like, so I do think that for example, okay, this is the weirdest conversation, but for example, there's this tiny part of Spain that's on the top of Portugal that everyone is like, why the fuck is that not Portugal? And I don't have an answer for you. But the point of it is, we don't speak the same language, but there's this common language that we both speak called Portuñol, which is basically when you put Portuguese with a Spanish accent or backwards so that you can understand each other. And I do think that like there has to be something like that. And it shouldn't be the same word because that's fucking stupid. But I think my thought is like I don't use TypeScript in the projects that I'm in by choice. The one that would require TypeScript is in a Rust project, so it doesn't make sense. The rest is just like marketing sites or blogs or whatever, and I don't think that needs TypeScript. I think that would just add overweight to something that I want to like code it fast. If it does have state or a design system or something more complicated, I think you should use TypeScript. And you're gonna hate yourself if you don't. I've done that and I hated myself and it was a terrible idea. But on the other hand, I don't think that like a lot of teaching materials should be in TypeScript because it is a different language that's harder to understand, that has way more like words to it. So like instead of having a file that's like 20 lines long, you have a file that's like 35 lines long, and the only reason is types. And it's like there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that it should always at least be a choice to the person. And if it can't be a choice, then it should be in JavaScript, unless you're teaching like things like TRPC, which is a completely different scenario because that is profound JavaScript, TypeScript, which is fine. I use it and I love it. So like that's great. Like I think API should be in TypeScript if you're using Node. But yeah, like I have some issues with it, mainly when it comes to people starting in the industry or people who are like doing JavaScript now that have no other option but to use TypeScript. And the main reason is because we all collectively decided that a homepage, like your portfolio needs TypeScript, and it doesn't. Like, it doesn't. Like, that's my main takeaway from that.
I really like that you said, yes, TypeScript has one, but also I don't use it and everybody doesn't need to use it all the time.
Yeah, that's my main thing. Like, I think TypeScript is good. I think
Yeah.
it has done very good things for the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I think it has done very good things for, like, God bless VS Code. Like, I think, if you write a library, there should be types in it, because otherwise, like, I just hate myself, and that's not cool. Like, come on. I don't know if that was a laugh or someone is sick. Are you sick or was it laugh? Or is it both? Both is also valid. But yeah, no, TypeScript is definitely one, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. We often, at least I do, I tend to think polarly. Like, if TypeScript is one, that means I'd never do JavaScript. But it's not the case, and I love this balanced viewpoint that you bring, that each thing has its place in our arsenal. Speaking of each thing, I wanna ask you, with TRPC and education around TRPC, have you intersected much with the JavaScript community? And I feel like a lot of the apprehensiveness to adopt TypeScript usually is from the developers I talk to is I don't really need it. Kind of like you were saying, with for your landing page, for your basic like one pager, you don't need it. And with something like TRPC, I feel like you would have to convince people they need it or they don't. So I'm curious about those conversations in the.
Well, I think the thing with TRPC is that it's fundamentally a tool to create developer experience. Like all TRPC basically is the TypeScript server lying to you in the front end about what the shape of an object is, and then you get autocomplete on it. So in that case, like it becomes fairly self-evident. I think when people type the word API and dot, and then they see all their routers, and they type dot again, and they see their procedures, and then they type their input, and they use the wrong type, and they get a red squiggly. Like they get it the first time they see it. That's usually my experience. So I think like on the application side, it really is quite self-evident to me at this point that if you're building anything non-trivial, TypeScript has one and has rightfully one.
Yeah. It's just a question of like where non-trivial is.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's quite a difficult question to me. Like the way I look at it is if you're writing like in a Jupyter notebook or something, like it's awesome that you're in a dynamic language, right? Because like you're using the data that you created like 10 seconds later, so you know what it is because you just wrote it. The thing I'm not sure about is where that inflection point is, but I think it's actually fairly short. Like, do you ever go through the editor and see code that you wrote 2 hours ago and you don't know what it does anymore? Like, I get that all the time, and I think the inflection point is something like 30 minutes probably. So, yeah, that makes it quite difficult. The other thing is with education, I think it makes a lot of sense to teach JavaScript because in the end we're compiling down to JavaScript. This is the one where I'm really not sure. And I think that's actually the much more interesting conversation because I think like we can all agree that if you're building a large app that will take months or years to build, like you should use TypeScript. Like that's fairly self-evident. Yeah.
because TypeScript future-proofs and protects applications,
Yeah.
like especially the larger ones.
Yeah, exactly. To me, the interesting questions are,
Oh no, he's right. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to say that TypeScript is not tests. I worked in a company that
Yes,
was like,
it's
oh, we
not.
have types, we don't need tests. It's also not documentation.
Yes,
the one question,
I like that.
can we get to a point where education is TypeScript first? And do we want to get to the point where education is TypeScript
Excellent
first?
question.
I think that's the second question is like, do we want to get that? Yeah.
So I have an opinion about this. I believe that if you think about education from the standpoint of what like the outcomes that you want people to leave that education experience with, the people that I'm teaching are not, at least the audience that I'm targeting, are not people who are going to just build a little site. I should just take a step back. I believe that you should use TypeScript as soon as you add any sort of tooling at all to anything. So once you have a tool that takes the code you wrote and converts it to something to be executed, this includes a minifier, then you may as well just use TypeScript. Especially, even if you're like, well, I don't want to worry about all the types and stuff. TypeScript's really good at inference. Most of my TypeScript looks just like JavaScript. I don't use return type. Yeah, that was a thing, right? Typing your return types. Yeah, I don't. And so, like, it doesn't seem to add a lot to most of the regular code that I'm writing. And so, yeah, I 100%, as soon as you add a tool, it may as well be TypeScript. So with that in mind, the people that I'm teaching are not just building like little sites or tiny little projects. They're here to build something that is lasting, that even if it's not a very large application, they do want to be able to maintain it in the long term. And so given that, they should be using TypeScript. And we all agree that that sort of thing should use TypeScript. And so why not teach them TypeScript from the very beginning? They're going to be writing TypeScript eventually. They need to know this stuff. And so that's why I say, like, if I'm teaching you JavaScript, sure, I'll leave the types out because we need to focus on the JavaScript syntax and all of that. But if I'm teaching you anything else, you're going to need to know TypeScript. Now, of course, like in my curriculum, I will have a module on teaching, on like learning TypeScript and learning that piece. And so we'll go, here's your HTML, JSS, or CSS, JS, and now your TypeScript, and now let's go build an app. And I think that sort of flow makes total sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense because the moment, like you said, the moment you...
I didn't say anything.
Okay. Yeah, the moment this mic is way louder than the other one. It's throwing me off.
Just like do this.
Whoa!
You're also very loud. I also don't think we need mics.
Can you hear me in the back? Yes. What?
You're very loud.
Okay, you know
So
what?
am I. Both of us don't need mics.
Here, Ken. So, fine, we don't need them.
Yeah.
This is interesting. So you're saying if you're teaching JavaScript, there's probably no other tooling. It's just entirely, like you save it.
Yeah. I haven't built it yet, but my fundamental JavaScript stuff will literally be just like, put this in the console.
Yeah, and that's fine. I wanted to ask, you mentioned this proposal, this TC39 stage 1 proposal. There's no one to give a mic to.
Yeah, sorry. It just feels.
We have bad hearing.
This panel is about the future of JavaScript and TypeScript, and this proposal touches that, right? So what does this proposal mean for JavaScript? If you could break it down for those of us who doesn't keep in touch with anything, ever.
Anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that typed JavaScript is a very important part. We've already established that. Like, Dino has a built-in. Bun has a built-in, and so building it into the language makes a lot of sense, just from the perspective that we want to write typed JavaScript, and it'd be really cool if we could do that without tools. And like, of course, it would be really nice to have this in Node. And should we just build TypeScript into Node, or should we standardize it so that it's not owned by a company? As cool as Microsoft has been in the last half decade, which, by the way, has been really cool to watch that transformation in the minds of developers and myself. As cool as they have been, they're not always cool. Like, companies are companies, and they have like these incentives that are funny. Yeah, capitalism. And so it would be cool if we could get that, the thing that we all love, inside of a standard. And so I think that's what that means.
Yeah, maybe regarding the proposal, I don't know enough about the JavaScript proposal to have a strong opinion about it, but I do know that there's situations where you just can't use TypeScript. So for example, in Create T3 app, we have some ES modules, and we do a lot of work to get them properly typed. So it would be really awesome to have a standard that's easier to use for that. Because yeah, I think the bottom line conclusion is like, we want everything typed, we need everything typed, and anything that helps us to get there is awesome.
Yeah. I was asked to use the mic for the recording. He literally came up here. Thanks, Raphael. Okay, so this means, so if I understand this proposal correctly, it means that when we write JavaScript, if it goes through to implementation in the spec, we have types in JavaScript.
Yeah, so I'm not involved in the TC39 since I left PayPal, but I talked with one of the champions, Gleb, or not Gleb. Oh shoot, now I've lost it. Amazing person, Israeli. I saw him at React Next in Israel. Anybody know his name? Who I'm talking about? No. All right, he's one of the champions. Now I feel bad. Don't tell him that I forgot his name. But yeah, and effectively, from what it looks like, the proposal is basic. It would be easier to describe the proposal in the features of TypeScript that are not going to come to JavaScript. Because the whole thing is like, oh yeah, that's a TypeScript, like it just looks exactly the same. Which, again, just shows that TypeScript won. And like Flow is actually very similar in syntax as well. So it's a pretty, it's just worse, yeah. I liked Flow. It had better inference. But yeah,
I also like things.
it is just clear that developers are cool with that syntax. I get a lot of, anytime I tweet about TypeScript, I get a lot of people saying TypeScript's the worst language of the world, and that's
so is
very
Tailwind.
mocking. I shouldn't have done that. Don't.
Like, I mean,
yeah. Yeah. But. So there clearly not everybody agrees with us that TypeScript is amazing, but I think it is, and it's effectively gonna be in JavaScript if this passes.
Yeah, like I do think that it is a really good thing if it goes into JavaScript, because first of all, it will go to a standard. It won't be, again, like owned by capitalism. Like these are the two main things, but then also like you can choose if you use it or not. So it's like, it's incremental, which is already incremental, but it's like, you don't have to do anything else to be able to use it. So I do think it's a good thing. Yeah. Like it should exist. Like it would be great if it wasn't JavaScript. Like I don't wanna, like I'm not gonna be like the person that's like, no, you're adding features to my language. Oh, why am I doing an accent? That was terrible. You're adding features to my language? How dare you? Like, no, that sounds great. Yeah. Give me free shit.
Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to add. Another thing I wanted to add to this is that I think a lot of the people who have negative opinions about TypeScript tried it the first time quite early when it still had growing pains.
It was all about
especially
classes.
in terms of being an application developer.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember libraries not being properly typed or
Yes.
having to install add type / whatever for everything?
Yes.
I think we're getting to a point now where as a TypeScript application developer, you just basically write JavaScript and type your function signatures, and then you get all the other benefits through inference.
Yes.
And in exchange, the library developers need to do a little bit more work, or a lot more work in some cases.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of where TypeScript is going, that it's an incredible DX for developers, and for library authors, it's rough,
getting
but
better.
we do it because we love the application developers.
Yeah, the dev tooling is getting better. Kent?
Yeah, so on that, it is more work for the library developer to write the types, but it ends up being less work because they have less, it's less teaching that they have to do. The documentation is important and should still happen, but it is less necessary as I'm using something I've never used before. I don't need to open the documentation. Okay, actually, really quick, for anybody who's writing a library, please use JSDoc. Like, please, in your types, tell me what this function does. Tell me what this parameter is. Like, I can see what it's called, but that is not enough. So please, write JSDoc for your libraries. But if you do that well and have like examples and stuff, like that is so helpful. And I never need to go to the docs, and that helps a ton.
Yeah.
So yes, it is more work for library authors in one way, but it actually alleviates a lot of pains on the other side too.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We're just about to wrap up. I want to ask you a question. She's like, it's not a, come on, it's a good question, I think.
I know where you live.
It's true. So there's now, I think of Yanni, who tweeted something really funny. Yanni, what's up? Nice to see you. Appreciate you. Can't wait for your talk tomorrow. Yanni is also going to be on a panel tomorrow, by the way, so look forward to that. But Yanni mentioned this trend we're seeing now, where it's so funny. Yanni's, if you don't follow Yanni, follow him. He's funny. He said, people actually do this now. They tell you, they rewrote a thing in Rust, and then they pause and wait for you to go, oh wow. So we talked about, JavaScript not typed, kind of interpreted in a way, and then you have TypeScript that brings the security, and has won because of it. There's also this trend now of moving to Rust and writing things in Rust, and you work at a Rust company, more or less. Yes. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that and how it interplays with this JavaScript, TypeScript shenanigans going on, or if it does at all.
I think as I do like Rust, and I think that the main difference is that Rust's compiler is incredibly good. I've had doesn't matter how much you type JavaScript and give it TypeScript, and it's 100% typed, you're still gonna get runtime errors. Don't tell me you don't. It's bullshit. You know how many runtime errors I got in the last 6 months? 1. Turns out it was a library error. We made an issue for it.
And it was closed.
I have no fucking clue. But I think the thing is the Rust compiler is this bad. I tell you how to make good. Wow. And it tells you how to make it good. And it's a completely different scenario. So I think that JavaScript was not built to have types, in the beginning. TypeScript tries to fill the gaps, but it also can't do everything you can. You would have to make a completely new language for that, which is fair. But Rust was made to have types, so everything is typed, but in a way where you can usually tell what's wrong and fix it. There is a borrowing system that's a pain in the ass, but eventually you get used to it. But I do think that does learning TypeScript make Rust easier? No. Nothing makes Rust easier. Only pain makes Rust easier. It's interesting. But the concept of TypeScript does help you learn Rust, but the concept of anything that has used types already makes you learn Rust. So it's it's not TypeScript itself, but if you come from only TypeScript, then it does help, because you get the idea of oh, okay, I know how to write types. I'm smart.
You heard it here first.
So my mom says, exactly with those words, you know how to write types. She doesn't know what it means, but... yeah, but I think the main difference is the compiler, which is also TypeScript can't do that kind of stuff because it doesn't have access to the same stuff that Rust does. So I think there is a big gap. Also, when you're supposed to type your responses, TRPC does that by default, but when you do a fetch and you're supposed to type your responses and stuff, most people don't do that. You have to do that in Rust. So it's it's just you have to do it. So it's a completely different, you don't get runtime errors.
You could come back to TypeScript from a Rust project and you're just primed to be more intense with your...
You're a better TypeScript developer.
It makes you a better TypeScript developer.
It does. I do think Rust makes you a better developer because it doesn't let you go around Yeah. I mean, it does, but it's really dirty.
I think using Rust a bit shows you everything that's not so good about TypeScript.
It's true. I think it made me like TypeScript less.
I understand, in
because
Rust,
it's so
if you have
good.
an error, it's hey, here's the line your error is on, here's what you are doing, here's what you should be doing.
And it also has...
If you write an error, it's here's 200 lines of garbage, and then you misnamed this problem.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately all the time we have, but can we hear it for these experts and their thoughts? This is phenomenal.
Experts.
Yeah, I believe it. It's incredible. Just to wrap up, I want you to have the closing thought, but before we do that, I need to do some shout-outs. You have a talk tomorrow?
I have a talk tomorrow.
A Rust?
Yes.
A Rust talk?
Rust for... Fine. Everyone could hear it. It's called Rust for all of us, so it's a beginner introduction talk to Rust when we build a small CLI.
Awesome. And you, before the closing thought, what are you excited about TRPC Rust? This is your moment. Share. He's like, but am I going to get the microphone? Or
Yeah, so if you haven't tried out TRPC, definitely try it. Shout outs to Alex, Julius, Sachin, Amit. They're the geniuses who write all the types. I just write documentation and teach people how to use it, basically. And if you want the easiest way to get started with it, check out Create T3 app. It's a command line tool. And it asks if you want JavaScript or TypeScript, but it only lets you pick TypeScript.
that's awesome. And now for the closing thought with Kent.
I can't top that. That was great. I so want to do that forever now. Oh, that's so funny. Last thought. I can't think of anything better to say than I am really grateful that we are part of a community that's really awesome. Y'all have been super nice, and I want to keep it that way. So please keep being nice to each other. Let's give each other empathy. And yeah, let's look forward to the afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.